And joining us now to talk about this and other hot topics, Democratic strategist Maria Cardona and Republican strategist Alice Stewart, both of them CNN political commentators and hosts of the podcast Hot Mics from Left to Right. Ladies, thanks so much for being with us.
Hey, Jim.
Alice, today we heard from Senator Ted Cruz. He was criticizing President Biden over his handling of the Chinese spy balloon. Republican Senator J.D. Vance slammed him on Twitter for a dereliction of duty or worse for not shooting down the balloon. I think he had an earlier tweet that showed him holding a firearm in his lap, suggesting that maybe it could be shot down, even though that could never happen. Speaker Kevin McCarthy tweeting, first President Biden refused to defend our borders. Now he won't defend our skies. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she also had a tweet of her own. Alice, are they in danger of maybe being full of hot air themselves? I mean, you know, what do you think?
Look, I agree that it was the right thing to do to take down this Chinese spy drone, but it was too little too late. And we're seeing choruses of Republicans and people across this country saying that it should not have gotten to this point. And as our colleague David Urban said this morning, what we saw was, in essence, China giving the middle finger the size of 3 school buses to America all the way across the country. And look, the Biden administration knew about this long ago and failed to acknowledge this and let people know until this was reported by the media. And what this basically did, it allowed China to gather intelligence and gather information all across the country. And that should not have happened. And I'm hearing from Republican and Democrat members of Congress who say their phones are being blown up by constituents, Republicans and Democrats, who are frustrated with this slow response by this administration, but they're finally recognizing the fact that China is a tremendous threat to the United States, not just for this intelligence gathering, but for their human rights violations, for their failure to condemn Russia for invading Ukraine. So if nothing else, people are understanding the real threat of China.
Maria, what do you think? How should the White House handle this? How should they respond to this? Apparently, Republican House lawmakers may pass a resolution going after Biden on this on the day of the State of the Union. What should be the White House response to all this?
I think their response to that resolution full of hot air is to prick it with the amazing accomplishments that he will go one by one and tell the American people about them during the State of the Union. Look, this bloviating by Republicans is just so demonstrative of the fact that they are desperate, trying to pin something on a president that has had massive accomplishments in these last 2 years, and they have no idea how to go about criticizing him, because when they do, they just can't help themselves in terms of the ridiculous overreach. The only thing they have demonstrated to the American people is that they would have no idea how to respond to this themselves. The way that they are saying that people should be shooting this up in the air, showing guns, saying that this should have been done the very first second that they saw it in the air, just shows that they have no common sense. They don't know strategic intelligence if it would slap them in the face. And in fact, what Joe Biden and the administration did was they put the safety of the American people first. They actually had time to figure out what intel China was trying to gather, and in fact did the reverse, and now we have intel on them. And now that they have shot the balloon over water, they're able to collect the debris and are able to study it. And so all of this, to me, just demonstrates, and I believe it demonstrates to the American people, that they made the right decision in terms of the person that they elected. Somebody calm, cool under pressure, strategic, responding with intelligence, as opposed to a party that knows nothing other than knee-jerk reactions and is the definition of being trigger-happy.
Well, let me park the balloon to the side for a moment here. Let me ask you about this new polling from the Washington Post, ABC News, showing little voter enthusiasm for Biden among Democrats, for Trump among Republicans. Alice, it sounds like there are some voters out there who would like to see a fresh face. You know, Joe Biden has dealt with this before for many years. He likes to say, "Don't compare me to the Almighty, compare me to the alternative." And Donald Trump obviously has the same problem among Republicans, where a lot of Republicans would like to see someone else leading the party in 2024. But Alice, you and I both know that is not how the primary process works. Donald Trump doesn't need to have a majority of Republican voters supporting him. He just needs a strong plurality, and he can knock these other candidates out of the field.
Right. Look, I think, obviously Donald Trump has a strong pull with the base of the party, but we also have many viable alternatives that will represent his policies, but not be quite the dumpster fire that he has been. But look, as far as Joe Biden is concerned, I think he needs to consider not just the alternative in the general election with the Republican, he needs to consider what kind of alternative he will be facing in the primary. Because while my dear friend Maria likes to talk about the accomplishments of this current administration and what he will be touting at the State of the Union, the reality is that poll that you just mentioned, Jim, where we have 40% of Americans in that poll say that they are not better off financially than they were 2 years ago. In fact, they are worse off. And the president's approval rating still is around 40%. That is not good. But on top of that, you're looking at Democratic voters say that about 38% of them would support Joe Biden. More than 50% of them would like to see someone else. So I think Joe Biden needs to be concerned about the alternative within his own party and not the Republican.
Maria, quick final word from you.
Joe Biden has nothing to be able to worry about in terms of anyone running against him when he decides to run.
And you voted for the Democratic Party to start with South Carolina. Is that's going to help Joe Biden, I would imagine, if in the event he has any challenges?
Absolutely, it will. And it also reflects what this country looks like. It gives voters of color a voice and a vote in terms of who is going to go along and get a boost out of the nominating calendar. And that's exactly what we wanted to do 15 months ago, and we're very proud of having done that now. And I believe Joe Biden will be the one and only candidate on the Democratic side. And like you said, Jim, he has faced being the most underestimated president and candidate, I think, in history. And he has shown time and again, when people say he can't do it, he does it and then some. And again, the massive accomplishments that he has been able to amass under his belt in the last 2 years that are just now showing the American people what they're going to get out of it. When there are polls that actually show the American people what Biden and the Democrats have done, trust in the economy shifts to Democrats by more than 5 points. So I think that's going to be a big plus for him, and there's a lot of time left.
Okay, ladies, I got to leave it there. We've got another story to get to right now, but thanks very much for the time, as always. We appreciate it.
Gracias, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, guys.